It was late evening, and the sky was covered with thick, gray clouds. The wind carried the smell of rain, and people hurried along the street, wrapping themselves in coats, rushing to get home before the storm began. Inside a small diner near the corner, the warm yellow lights glowed through the windows. The place was not fancy. It had a few wooden tables, a counter with a coffee machine that hissed softly, and the sweet smell of fresh bread floating in the air. The woman who owned the diner stood behind the counter, wiping it down with slow, tired movements. Business had been slow that day, just like most days. She worked alone, running this place since her husband passed away a few years ago. It was her only source of income, but she also loved feeding people. Cooking gave her comfort. Even when the chairs were empty, she kept the soup hot and the bread fresh, hoping someone would come in. The door opened slowly with a soft creak, letting in a rush of cold air. She looked up and saw a man step inside. He looked different from her usual customers. His coat was old and worn out, his shoes muddy, and his hair messy as if he had been walking for hours. His face was thin, his cheeks hollow. He stood near the door for a moment, almost unsure if he should even come in. She gave him a small smile, the kind you give to make someone feel welcome. "Come in, it's warm here," she said softly. He nodded but didn't speak. His eyes wandered around the diner, then settled on an empty table in the corner. He sat down slowly, keeping his head down like he didn't want to bother anyone. She noticed the way he looked at the menu lying on the table. He didn't pick it up. Instead, he kept staring at his hands. His shoulders tensed out. Something about him made her pause. Maybe it was the way he kept glancing toward the counter, then quickly looking away whenever she met his eyes. She had seen people like him before, people who were hungry but too proud or too embarrassed to admit they had no money. She walked over, carrying a pot of hot coffee. "Would you like some?" she asked gently. He looked up, surprised, as if he didn't expect kindness. Maybe just a small cup," he murmured, his voice rough like he hadn't spoken much in days. She poured him a full cup anyway. "It's on the house," she said before he could ask the price. He wrapped his hands around the cup, holding it close like it was the only warm thing in his life right then. He didn't drink right away. Instead, he kept staring at the steam rising from the cup as if it was something precious. The woman went back behind the counter, but kept watching him quietly. His coat was wet from the drizzle outside, and he kept shivering now and then. It wasn't hard to guess he hadn't eaten in a while. She finally decided. Without asking him what he wanted, she went into the kitchen. A few minutes later, she came back with a bowl of hot soup, some fresh bread, and a small plate of scrambled eggs. She placed it in front of him. His eyes widened. "Ma'am, I don't have money," he said quickly, panic flashing across his face. "It's okay," she said with a smile. "Just eat. You look like you need it." For a moment he didn't move. Then, slowly, he picked up the spoon. The first sip of soup seemed to break something inside him. His shoulders relaxed, and he began eating quietly, like someone who didn't want to waste a single drop. She pretended to clean the counter, but kept sneaking glances at him. There was something about the way he ate, grateful, silent, that touched her heart. He didn't complain about the food, didn't ask for anything more. He just ate like this meal was the best thing he'd had in a long time. When he finished, he looked up at her. His eyes were shiny, as if he wanted to say something but couldn't find the words. Finally, he whispered, "Thank you." She nodded. "You're welcome." He looked like he wanted to explain more, maybe to tell her his story. But then he lowered his gaze again, as if carrying too many burdens to share all at once. The rain outside began to fall harder, tapping against the windows, filling the silence between them. The woman didn't ask him any questions. She didn't need to. Right now, all that mattered was that he wasn't hungry anymore. The rain outside kept falling, soft at first, then heavier, filling the air with a rhythmic sound. The small diner felt like a warm shelter against the storm. The stranger sat quietly at the table, his empty bowl pushed slightly forward as if he didn't want to seem greedy by asking for more. The woman walked over and refilled his coffee. Without saying a word, "Thank you," he murmured again, his voice soft, almost shy. She smiled kindly. "Don't mention it. Everyone needs a warm meal sometimes." For a moment, neither spoke. The rain tapping on the windows filled the silence. The man wrapped his hands around the coffee cup again, like he was holding on to the last bit of warmth in the world. Finally, he looked up at her. "You didn't have to do this," he said, his eyes lowering right after. "Most people, they look at me like I don't exist." The woman felt a pinch in her heart. She had seen it before, people who had fallen on hard times, people others crossed the street to avoid. She pulled out the chair across from him and sat down slowly. "Maybe most people forget," she said softly, "but kindness doesn't cost anything." He let out a small breath, almost like a laugh but sadder. "Kindness," he repeated. "Feels like I haven't seen that in a long time." The woman studied his face. He looked older than he probably was, like life had beaten him down faster than it should have. His beard was rough, and his eyes had dark circles under them, the kind you get when you sleep more on benches than in beds. "Do you have family?" she asked carefully, not wanting to pry too much. He hesitated, his fingers tracing the edge of the coffee cup. "Used to," he said finally, "before everything went bad." She waited, letting him speak at his own pace. "I had a job," he continued slowly. "Worked at a warehouse. It wasn't much, but it paid the rent. Then the accident happened. My leg." He tapped his right leg lightly under the table. "Couldn't work for months. Boss let me go. Bills piled up. I tried, but things just kept getting worse. One day, I came home, and the landlord had changed the locks." The woman felt a heavy ache in her chest. She had heard stories like this before, but hearing it straight from someone's mouth was different. "So now," he said with a tired shrug, "I go wherever my feet take me. Try to find odd jobs. Sometimes I get lucky. Most times I don't." He paused, then looked at her with a small smile. "But tonight, I guess I was lucky. Your diner. Your kindness." She reached across the table and patted his hand lightly. "You don't owe me anything," she said gently. "Everyone needs help sometimes. Maybe someday you'll help someone else." He nodded slowly, his eyes thoughtful, as if the idea had never crossed his mind in a long time. The rain outside softened again, and a few more customers walked in, shaking off umbrellas and ordering coffee to warm themselves. The woman got up to take care of them, but every now and then, she glanced at the stranger sitting quietly in the corner, finishing the last of his coffee. When the diner grew busy for a few minutes, he stood up and walked to the counter. He waited until she was free, then spoke softly. "Ma'am, I can help clean up or wash dishes, something to pay for the meal." She shook her head with a smile. "No need. Just promise me you'll take care of yourself." He opened his mouth like he wanted to argue, then stopped. Finally, he nodded. "I promise," he said softly. She packed a small paper bag with some bread and a bottle of water and handed it to him. "For later," she said. His eyes softened with gratitude. "You're kind," he said again, his voice thick like he was holding back emotions. As he turned to leave, the rain had slowed to a drizzle. He stepped out into the night with the bag in his hand, his shoulders straighter than when he first walked in, like the meal had given him not just food but a little piece of hope. The woman watched him go, wondering if she'd ever see him again. Something about the way he left made her feel like this wasn't the end of his story, or hers. The next evening came with the same quiet drizzle tapping against the diner windows. Business was slow as usual. A few regulars came and went, ordering coffee, some pie, and hot soup to keep warm on the chilly night. She kept glancing at the door. now and then wondering if the stranger would return. Something about the way he left the night before silent, almost hesitant stayed with her. And then, just as she was wiping down the counter, the door creaked open. It was him. He stepped inside slowly, the same worn coat hanging loosely on his shoulders, but this time he looked different. His eyes held less hesitation, more determination. He didn't sit right away. Instead, he walked toward the counter where she stood. "You came back," she said softly. He nodded. "I wanted to say thank you again," he said, his voice a little stronger this time. "I didn't know how much I needed that meal yesterday until I had it. I can't remember the last time someone showed me kindness without asking for anything in return." The woman smiled gently. "You don't need to thank me. Food isn't just for people who can pay. Sometimes it's for people who need it most." He looked at her for a long moment before speaking again. "I'm leaving town tomorrow," he said slowly. "I have some things I need to take care of. Maybe find work somewhere else." She nodded quietly, unsure why his words made her chest feel heavy. "I wanted to give you this," he added, pulling a small, folded envelope from his coat pocket and placing it on the counter. "It's not much, but it's all I can leave right now." She frowned slightly. "You don't owe me anything," she said firmly. "I know," he said softly, "but I want to leave something behind. For the kindness you gave me." Before she could respond, he gave her a small nod, almost like goodbye, then turned and left, the door swinging shut behind him. She stood there for a moment, staring at the envelope lying on the counter. Curiosity slowly got the better of her. She picked it up, the paper thin but slightly heavy in her hands. Inside was a single sheet of paper folded neatly. She unfolded it and found a short note written in simple handwriting. "Sometimes, kindness finds its way back to you when you least expect it. Thank you for treating me like a human being. You gave me more than a meal. You gave me dignity." A stranger. She read it twice, her eyes tracing the words again and again. There was something about the way it was written, simple, heartfelt, that left her with a lump in her throat. But that wasn't all. Tucked behind the note was something else. Another folded piece of paper. When she opened it, her hands trembled slightly. It wasn't money or a letter. It was something official. A document of some sort. She scanned the words quickly but didn't understand at first. It looked like some kind of agreement, a catering contract from a well-known company in town, a company with hundreds of employees. Her heart started to pound. Why would he leave this? She read it again carefully. The document wasn't addressed to anyone yet, but it had all the details. The company name, the meal services they needed, and an attached note at the bottom that read, "I'll explain soon. Please be ready." She sat down slowly, the paper shaking in her hands. The stranger, the man in the worn coat who had walked in hungry and tired. He wasn't who she thought he was. But who was he? And what did this mean for her small diner? The next morning, the diner was busy again. The smell of fresh bread filled the air, and sunlight poured through the windows after last night's rain. The woman moved quickly behind the counter, serving coffee to workers on their way to long shifts and packing sandwiches for kids heading to school. Everything felt normal until she saw the envelope. It was sitting on the counter right near the cash register. A simple white envelope with no name on it. She hadn't noticed it when she first opened the diner that morning. It looked like someone had slipped it there quietly. Curious, she picked it up and opened it. Inside was a folded note written in neat but hurried handwriting. "Thank you for the food and the kindness. You didn't know me, but you treated me like a human when no one else did. I came in hungry, but I left with more than a full stomach. I left with hope. I can't pay you back the way I want to write now, but soon you'll understand." The stranger. She read it twice, her hands trembling slightly. Then she noticed there was another piece of paper folded with the letter. It looked official, with a company logo at the top. At first, She thought maybe it was some old receipt or a flyer someone left behind. But when she unfolded it, her breath caught. It wasn't just a piece of paper. It was a business contract, a catering agreement. The name of the company printed at the top was one she recognized immediately. It was a major manufacturing company in the area, the kind with hundreds of employees. The document was a request for her diner to handle their staff lunches for the next 6 months, with the promise of more work if it went well. The amount they were offering was far more than she ever made in an entire year of struggling to keep the diner open. She stood frozen, the paper shaking in her hands. It didn't make sense. How could this stranger have anything to do with such a big company? Her mind raced back to the night before. The thin man in the worn-out coat, the one who had eaten quietly, thanked her softly, and left like he had nothing to his name. Could it be him? She read the letter again slowly. I can't pay you back the way I want to right now, but soon you'll understand. Understanding started to dawn on her, piece by piece. Maybe he wasn't just some random drifter looking for food. Maybe there was more to his story than he let on. Her heart pounded as she imagined the possibilities. Was he connected to the company somehow? A manager? A businessman fallen on hard times? Maybe even the owner's son? But why would someone like that come into her small, simple diner dressed like a stranger with nothing? She didn't have the answers yet. All she knew was that this single piece of paper could change everything for her. Her diner, the one she had struggled to keep open after her husband's passing, the one where some days she barely earned enough to pay bills. This diner could now become something bigger. She sat down at one of the tables, staring at the contract, her mind spinning around her. Customers came and went, ordering coffee, laughing, eating breakfast as usual. But for her, the world had shifted in a single moment. She imagined being able to hire help, fix the leaky roof, buy new chairs for the diner instead of the old wobbly ones that had been there for years. She imagined paying off her debts, maybe even taking a day off once in a while, something she hadn't done in years, and all because she gave a stranger one free meal. Her eyes stung as she read the letter one more time. The words, "You treated me like a human," echoed in her heart. How many times had this man been ignored, judged, or turned away before he walked into her diner? How many doors had closed on him before one opened with a bowl of soup and warm bread? She folded the note carefully, placed it back in the envelope, and tucked it close to her heart. For the first time in years, she felt like maybe life was about to change for the better. She didn't know who he really was yet. She didn't know why he chose her diner, but deep inside, she felt this was only the beginning of a story that would stay with her forever. The sun was shining bright the next morning when she unlocked the diner's door, but her hands shook slightly as she turned the key. The envelope with the letter and the catering contract was tucked safely in her bag, and she hadn't stopped thinking about it all night. She barely slept. Her mind kept circling back to the stranger, the tired eyes, the worn coat, the quiet "thank you" as he left. He had given no hint of this gift, no clue about who he really was. She had fed him, expecting nothing in return. And yet here she was, holding something that could change her entire life. The bell above the diner door rang as the first customer of the day walked in. But it wasn't just one, it was 3 men in suits. They looked out of place in her small diner. One of them stepped forward with a smile. "Are you the owner?" he asked. She nodded, her heart pounding. "We're from the company," he said, showing her a business card with the same logo printed on the contract. "We wanted to confirm the catering deal. Everything has been approved." She froze. "So, it's real?" she whispered. The man smiled. "Very real. Starting next week, we'll need lunches for 200 workers daily. Payment will be upfront." Her knees felt weak. 200 meals a day. Enough money to finally breathe again. "But," she began slowly, "who set this up?" The man's smile grew softer. "Our boss's son," he insisted. Said you showed him kindness when no one else did. Her eyes widened. Boss's son? Before she could ask more, the bell above the door rang again, and there he was, the stranger. But this time, he didn't look like the same man who had walked in hungry and tired 2 nights ago. He was clean-shaven, wearing a simple but neat suit. His hair combed back. The weariness in his eyes was gone, replaced by something lighter. Calmer, he walked toward her slowly. For a moment, she couldn't move. "Hello," he said softly. She finally found her voice. "It was you," she whispered. He nodded. "I wanted to tell you the truth that night," he said. "But I wanted to see. I wanted to know if kindness still existed in this world when someone had nothing to give back." He paused. "You didn't just feed me. You gave me hope." No one had looked at me like a human being in a long time. She felt her eyes burn with tears. "I own part of the company with my father," he continued. "But lately I'd been lost. I needed to step away from everything, see life differently. When you gave me that meal without asking for anything, in return, it reminded me of the good I had forgotten." He smiled softly. "So I want to give something back, not charity. A partnership. Your diner will handle all our meals from now on. And I'll help you expand if you want." She couldn't speak for a moment. Her heart felt too full. Finally she managed. "All I gave you was soup and bread." He shook his head. "You gave me more than that. You gave me kindness when I was nothing but a stranger." The men in suits handed her the final paperwork. The official deal signed and sealed. The amount written on it made her dizzy. It was more money than she had ever seen at one time in her entire life. Her diner, the small, struggling diner she had kept alive with sweat and tears, was about to become something bigger. As the men left, she turned to the stranger again. "Why?" she asked softly. He smiled. "Because you didn't ask who it was before you helped me. That's the kind of person worth helping back." The next week, the diner transformed. Workers came in every morning for the company's orders. She hired help for the first time, bought new equipment, even fixed the roof that had leaked for years. And every time she looked at the envelope with the letter inside, she remembered the night it all began: one free meal, one act of kindness, and a stranger who turned out to be the blessing she never expected. The diner that once struggled to stay open now buzzed with life, laughter, and hope. And in the quiet moments, when she stood behind the counter watching her busy diner, she would smile softly, knowing one thing: sometimes the smallest act of kindness can return to you in the biggest way imaginable.